We have bought into that illusion of superwoman, which is a fantasy. It's not a reality. We hurt too. We have feelings too. We get tired, we get overwhelmed, and we have to get to a point where we are able to acknowledge that and share that and not just make up and look good and pretend and live in that non-realistic world that everything is all right.
Welcome back to the Leaving a Rich Legacy podcast. I am your host, Jessica Rich, and this podcast is more than just a series of conversations. It's a love letter to my younger self and to anyone seeking courage and empowerment within the layers of our shared experiences in the Black and Brown community. In our new series, I Choose Me, we're diving deep into the transformative journeys of our incredible guests who have bravely made the choice to put themselves first. Together, we'll unpack the conversations that are often left unheard in the Black community and celebrate the power of self love, resilience, and authenticity. Join me as we amplify these vital stories so each of us can leave a richer legacy for the generations to come. Today, our special guest is Senator Rosalind Osgood. Senator Osgood is a Broward County native. She holds a master's and doctoral degree in public administration from Nova Southeastern University. She has earned a master's degree in divinity from New Orleans Southern Baptist Theological ATS fully accredited seminary. She has been the chief executive officer of Mount Olive Development Corporation for the past 23 years, a Faith in Florida organizer, a Florida Senator for District 32, and an associate minister at New Mount Olive Baptist Church. She is a former adjunct professor at Nova Southeastern University and the author of two books, The Story Behind the Story and Influential Women Leader. She is a member of numerous professional organizations, including Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, the Links Incorporated, and a life member of the Fort Lauderdale Broward branch of the NAACP. She is also a graduate of Leadership Florida Cornerstone Class 37. Senator Osgood, I am so excited to have you here with us today. Thank you for being a guest.
Thank you, Jessica, and thank you so much for having me.
It is a pleasure to have you. I am super excited to have you share a little bit about your journey and story. And I'll just kick it off and allow you to tell us a little bit about yourself. Who is Senator Rosalind Osgood?
So first, I am a mom and a grandmom. That's my highest calling, my biggest joy. I think all children are a blessing from God, and God has blessed me with three biological kids and three bonus kids that I was blessed with through my second marriage. I am a Broward County native. I still live in the same community that I was born and raised in. I love this community. I am excited about the many great things that happen in our community, the love and the commitment of the community of building people. 35 years ago, I lived homeless on the streets of Fort Lauderdale, battling with substance use disorder disease. January is Substance Use Disorder Disease Awareness Month. It is the only disease that's criminalized. If you get diagnosed with cancer, lupus, other diseases, you go to a healthcare facility and you get treated for it. The disease that I live with, substance use disorder disease, is a disease that you're criminalized and stigmatized because of it. But through the grace of God, places like Broward Alcohol Rehabilitation Center, Mr. Guy Willer, who was my counselor, my church, and countless members of this community in various organizations, I was able to recover and rebuild my life to the extent that I've been blessed to go back to school to earn 5 degrees, to raise very, very productive children who are defying the odds and statistics. Statistics say that people like me never recover. Our kids end up in jail and dropping out of school, but that has not been my story. My life has been filled with a lot of highs and lows. I've had to share some cheers, made some bad choices and bad decisions, but the whole premise of being resilient has been my life story.
So thinking about you and you sharing, a little bit about yourself, this is one of the questions that I really enjoy from my guests because we all tell our story a little differently about who we are, and what helped shape us. So, can you briefly share a little bit about your journey of choosing yourself?
Certainly. I was raised by grandparents. My mom and dad, biological mom and dad, were teen parents. I was raised by grandparents from the silent generation. So a lot of traditions that they taught me was that you don't make waves, you don't talk about certain things, you just work hard and get an education. Well, in choosing myself, as life kept lifing for me, I realized that my call was to help make the world a better place, but I didn't have to make myself a martyr in doing so. That if I'm going to truly be a public servant and be of value to the world that I live in and the world to come, that I had to have a sustainability plan, that I had to do the necessary things to live and thrive with the substance use disorder disease, that I had to avail myself to higher education so that I could think critically as I look to make decisions. And then I had to also be committed to hard work to make sure that I had the necessary resources to provide the best means and avenues for my children to also be successful.
Thinking about just your journey of choosing yourself and not only for you, but for your children, was there a pivotal moment in your life where you said, I have to make a change? I have to prioritize myself. You're doing amazing things in the community. You have been working on yourself, as far as your education and giving back to the community. But then also, as you stated, really making sure that you develop who you are and to overcome that. So, is there a pivotal moment that was in your life that you can think of?
Yes, Jessica, I can actually think of two distinct pivotal moments. One was December 2nd, 1989, when I was in the Volusia County Jail and I was battling really hard with addiction. I wasn't clean. It was just bad. And I thought about how horrible it would be for my children to have to come to jail to see me, and how if I didn't find a way to thrive with this disease, I was either going to die or spend a lifetime chasing that first high. So it was at that time that I decided to follow a comprehensive treatment program, go to recovery centers for treatment, follow 12-step programs, and do whatever I needed to do to stay clean and sober first. That was the first pivotal moment. And as I began to walk that path, my life got significantly better. I was able to go back to school. I was able to get a very good job. I work as the CEO of my church's nonprofit, as you said, for the last 23 years. But then I became addicted to work. So I was working all kind of ungodly hours, writing grants, just trying to fulfill this notion or this sick ideology of perfectionism, being all things to all people. And as a result of that, my immune system became very fragile, and I ended up getting diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma in my throat. And that was a 2-year battle with cancer, chemo, and all of the things that go along with that. And during that time, my grandmother, who was my number one fan, my biggest supporter, died. And my husband of 18 years and I got a divorce. So my whole world was literally turned upside down. both privately and publicly. The divorce was a very public divorce. It was a lot of shame and embarrassment because he started seeing somebody else. And it was in the midst of that darkness that I really, really began to understand that I needed to prioritize me, that I needed to make sure that I was healthy mentally, physically, emotionally, that I needed to rest. You know, as I wrote about in my book, Influential Woman Leader, leadership is a two-edged sword. Leadership is dangerous because in the midst of great tangible accomplishments, you can find yourself simultaneously suffering physically, mentally, emotionally, and socially. You become overworked, overwhelmed, and in some instances, overweight. So there has to be a balance. And that balance comes by prioritizing yourself. I find it interesting, Jessica, as I spend a lot of time thinking about leadership and all of the capacities that this wonderful community give me to lead. And I'm very intentional, not only about professional development, but also personal development. And as we think about it, in businesses, we always do a SWOT analysis. We have our strategic plans. We have a strategy, but we don't oftentimes pause to do that where we have a life plan. We have a sustainability plan for ourselves. So at that time, I made a major adjustment. I started making sure that I scheduled my rest time. I scheduled my days off. I'm very intentional about making sure that I'm mentally healthy, whether it's counseling or reading books or just taking time away from the hustle and bustles and demand of public service. I began to own who I was as a person, both assets and liabilities. I decided that I wasn't going to waste no more time trying to gain what I had lost or trying to be perfect. It is a very sick ideology because as human beings, we've been created in the image of God, the Omega Day with God of God, and we have both good characteristics and bad characteristics. And the way that it's supposed to work is that I'm supposed to be so closely linked to my brothers and sisters in this world that their good characteristics overshadow my bad characteristics. In other words, I may be weak in an area, like I'm not a good marketer, but I know many people that are great marketers. So me being connected to them allows me the benefit of their gift of marketing. So I realized at some point that if I didn't eat healthy, I mean, I changed my whole eating habit. A lot of traditional ham hocks, chitlins, things that I grew up with, I simply quit eating them because the pork was not good for my immune system. I started becoming more intentional about eating vegetables and not always eating fast foods and potato chips. I still eat it sometimes, but I eat it in moderation. I don't eat it excessively. I began to read more things about my health, try to understand more about my family's medical history to know that some of my genes are that have been given to me through DNA puts me at risk for heart disease and diabetes and those things, and taking those preventive measures to do what I could to make sure that I'm healthy. I'm walking, like, simple things like parking farther away from the building than closer so that I could get my steps in. And one of the major parts of that decision was realizing that there were toxic people, people that I was not healthy enough to interact with and be around, people that said and did things that triggered me, that made me mentally, emotionally, socially, and physically unhealthy, and getting rid of those people and those things, taking ownership of my own life and setting myself up on a trajectory for success. And for me, a lot of that was anchored in my faith, my belief in God, this being that's greater than me, that gives me the supernatural capacity and strength to make those tough choices and tough decisions to prioritize my own self and my own well being. If I'm healthy mentally, emotionally, socially, and physically, then I can transfer that to my kids. I can help them or demonstrate or be a role model for them so that they're on trajectories to be not only successful, but to be healthy mentally, to be healthy physically, to be healthy emotionally and socially.
Senator Osgood, you just dropped so many different gems in what you shared about your journey and your intentionality. I think you hit so many points that I want to try to make sure I recap and dive deep into a few things that you said. But I understand and I heard that it took your health declining for you to say, I need to prioritize myself because you were addicted to working. And I feel like as Black women, a lot of times we do overwork ourselves, and we wear so many hats. But it took your health, you said you had cancer, and that was the turning point for you. But then also you realizing that you had to remove toxic people, and you didn't have to be the subject matter expert. If there's somebody in marketing that is a better fit for do the role, you were comfortable with being able to reach out to them and taking away that feeling of perfectionism so that you can be there for your kids, but also instill that in them. So I first want to kind of dive into deep into you talked about being addicted to work. And there are so many people who are addicted to work and do not take care of themselves. Was there so your health, right? So then your health started to become an issue, which sometimes I'll speak for myself. That was a turning point for me as well. Is there anything else that you do now when you realize you are starting to maybe create those habits, or do you create those habits where you start to overwork yourself and you have to kind of say, all right, I got to prioritize myself?
Yeah, so I grew up playing basketball, and when you're an athlete, you learn how to be very disciplined from conditioning, certain way you shoot the ball, certain things you do. And I've been able to benefit from that in my life. So I am a scheduler. So my calendar will say nap time. My calendar will block off a day where it's my day off. I'm clergy, so a lot of times on Saturday and Sundays, I'm working. I'm visiting people that are sick, and Sunday is church all day. So I try to take one day out of the week when I am resting, just doing what I want to do. Maybe it's just going and sitting outside of the beach. I'm intentional about webinars, especially now that we can do a lot of stuff virtually, and reading books and understanding that sometimes it's just as simple as walking out of an office that you've been working in for 5 hours and just going outside to get some sunlight and some fresh air change the trajectory of your mind, of your health. So I try to be very disciplined. Sometimes my work being a senator and working full-time at the nonprofit, I have to run back and forth to Tallahassee as well as attend many, many community events. So I try to balance that. I know that I can't be every place at every time. I try to make sure that I live as a human being and that I speak to the people that have called me to serve, where they always remember that I am a human being. So I talk about my feelings when it's good and bad, when I'm having bad days. Right now, it's a very difficult political time, but I give voice to that. I pray about that. So I try to be disciplined in those techniques that I've learned through working the 12 steps, through years of counseling, through playing sports, through, looking at other people, reading books about success, learning about different things so that my thinking and my actions can be in line with that sustainability plan. I think we, live in America where cash is king. So we all want money, and it's nothing wrong with that. We want to get ahead. We want to work. We want to have savings. We want to really build that economic wealth. But we have to work to do that in a way that we don't become a martyr, that we don't kill ourselves. And if I could just be very direct, Jessica, as Black women, we are put in this position to be superwoman, which really kind of only exists in a song. Karen White many years ago started talking about, I'm not your superwoman. You want me to get up and cook these eggs. And then Alicia Keys came back with a remix that said, I am your superwoman. Even when I'm a mess, I have a S on my chest. And I think as Black women, we have bought into that illusion of superwoman, which is a fantasy. It's not a reality. We hurt too. We have feelings too. We get tired, we get overwhelmed, and we have to get to a point where we are able to acknowledge that and share that, and not just make up and look good and pretend and live in that non-realistic world that everything is all right and everything is okay all the time, because that makes us emotionally sick, mentally sick, and physically sick. So I made that shift and I live authentically on purpose. I talk about my struggles and challenges that I had in my life as a way of minimizing the trauma, that it can't cause me the pain today that it caused me a year ago. When I'm not feeling well, I, manage my emotions or use emotional intelligence to give voice. We're sad sometimes, we're happy, we're angry. All of these are natural emotions that a lot of times we don't know what to do with, or how to address them, or how to live in them. It is perfectly okay to have human expressions of tears, human expressions of being frustrated, being even angry, as long as it doesn't go to an extreme to turn into retaliation and unforgiveness. So I try to work through disciplines, using also spiritual disciplines of prayer and Bible study and fellowshipping with other believers as a way of balancing my thinking, balancing my actions, and helping me be as healthy as I can. And some days I fall short, but I get another day, I get another chance to start over and try again. So I keep trying to develop, professionally. Like over the summer, I took a couple of AI courses. I want to understand this technology, this stuff, but I also work on my personal development. I can clearly see that I am a better person. I have more compassion and more patience today in my year of turning 60 years old than I did in my year of being 20 years old.
I love the authenticity that you just shared because, to your point, looking at you, right, we see the success, all the things that you have done. You're a senator, you're an author, you're working for a nonprofit, you're giving back, you're a mentor, you're inspiring all these people. But sometimes we forget that there's a journey behind that. And it's okay to share that journey to hopefully inspire someone to not make the same mistakes, but then also embrace their journey as well. So, have you found it difficult in your role to show up as your authentic self, or has this naturally just been who you are?
I don't find it difficult if I live authentic as myself every day. It's a lot easier than faking and pretending. I can work on being the best me. But when you're faking and you're pretending, then you're trying to wear too many masks and trying to be all things to all people. So I talk about being homeless, my struggle with addiction, whether I'm in the state senate, whether I'm in church, whether I'm talking to a group of kids. And you get reactions from people. I had to learn how to overcome rejection. I've always been a tall, person, and, a lot of unkind words and things that people say about tall people, a lot of things people say about drug addicts. I had to learn how to overcome rejection and not allow the rejection to minimize my self-worth or to cause me to hate and retaliate against people that were rejecting me. You know, even sometimes now when you're Black, you are a senator. Being in the state legislature is a very, very powerful position. Being Black female clergy, you don't, always fit in with the good old boy network. I don't really kind of fit into any, say, script or mode, but I just show up authentically as me because people value the truth. You know, when you can just be transparent and be real, people, even if they don't agree with you, they respect you. But dealing with the rejection and having the capacity to forgive is how I keep my heart from being bitter and contaminated with anger, in resentment. I've had to learn ways to deal with difficult people where, I don't, literally choke them out or use profanity, that I find myself, praying for them or just avoiding them until my mind is healthy enough to engage them in a way that I'm going to move toward changing things and not creating more chaos. And I think my biggest motivation is because I understand that we are our children's role model, especially if you are a parent. They're going to watch more what you do than what you say. And for me, God has blessed me to be a school board member that put me in contact with hundreds and hundreds of more kids. Now on the state level, I deal with kids from, 3 years old, even a lot of the adult kids. Sometimes we have 30-year-old kids because we're not really taught how to manage our emotions. So we still have the temper tantrums like we did when we were 8. But it's very easy for me to show up authentically as myself. I don't have to worry about keeping up with lies. I don't have to worry about, somebody finding out the real me and not liking me or mistreating me. I can only be the best me. So every day I try to work to be a better me. I've embraced the fact that God created me in his image, just the way that I am. Sometimes as women, we struggle with our looks. We struggle, with our weight. I remember when I went through the fiasco with cancer and I lost, all of my hair and, it began to grow back. But I'm naturally that girl that's tomboyish. I don't really like doing hair. And look at God, he blessed me with weaves. So now I can go let somebody professionally do my hair that it looks good. I don't have to worry about it. I can kind of get up and go brush it if I want, but I have a way of meeting my own needs that I can walk in my true self-worth and dignity every day and feel good about it. As I embrace my purpose, and my purpose is to live to make the world a better place. I have to believe that the way that God created me, the way I'm wired, is also a part of me achieving that goal of making the world a better place. So I don't spend a lot of time trying to impress people or please people or, be something that I'm not to fit in or to be accepted by people because it kind of doesn't work. We all are who we are. That's the whole notion of diversity, that God wants us to use collective excellence. He wants us working together. He doesn't want me one up in you. I'm a clergy person, so I preach, but I don't sing. But I know a whole heap of people that do sing. So if I need a song, I'm going to call one of them.
You mentioned that you had to remove toxic people and negative people from your life. And I know that setting those type of boundaries can be difficult because sometimes that could be friends, associates, coworkers, it could be family. But for you, how were you able to establish those boundaries to separate yourself from those individuals? Because it sounds like you are very in tune with yourself. I love, as a self care advocate, a mental health advocate, I love that at your level and all the things that you're doing, you are so in tune with yourself, which is a goal for so many, and it's something that I hope every day I'm working to achieve that because I know that self-care is a journey. But for you, how are you able to establish those boundaries? Because having those type of people can negatively affect your mental, your spiritual, emotional health. So for you, how did you establish those boundaries?
So, Jessica, I learned how to set boundaries in the 12-step program. In the 12-step program, you're taught to take a fearless moral inventory of yourself, to confront your shortcomings, your wrongs, and then work on daily meditation to improve your conscious contact with God. So, when you're seeking to have a conscious contact with God, the first reflection is of yourself. So I stopped blaming those people and who they were for my pain because I could make a decision not to engage or not to be around them. It's kind of like, I don't use drugs anymore. So I don't buy it. I don't go places where it's being used. So if I'm trying to be mentally healthy so that I could be emotionally and physically healthy, I know who's toxic. I know who the people are that would trigger me. Sometimes it's not easy. Sometimes it means walking away from an 18-year marriage, understanding not that the other person is a bad person or highlighting their issues or their downfalls, but understanding that me as a person, I'm not healthy enough to be in relationship with that person. I can't really change that person. I can't help them, move to the next level, nor can I move to the next level being in that relationship. Even taking tough lenses and evaluating what we sometimes call friendships. When we look at a lot of the relationships that we have, they're not authentic, they're more transactional. So you have friends and people that are part of certain circles because of status, because of money, because of position, because something they want from you or something you want from them. And it's just transactional. So through working the 12 steps, I've been able to be authentic, to build authentic relationships with people that allow me to show up as me, whether I'm having a good day and a bad day, and they give me grace and love and mentorship and words of empowerment and encouragement. And sometimes they hold me accountable. And then just being able to do that for other people. Some family members I've had to literally cut off because of the negative conversations, because of the always pitting one against the other one, the whole drive of competition that's created by this fake notion of perfectionism or people trying to make themselves feel good or shine at somebody else's expense or creating darkness. And it has been, a journey. But the more I practice it, the more effective I become with it. Because at the end of the day, if I'm not mentally, physically, and emotionally healthy, then I'm not good to the people that I try to serve every day. I'm not good for my kids. Then I become that toxic instrument in those relationships. I become that menace to this society, that, human hazard to society. So it's very personal to me. And, I, really suffered through substance use disorder disease and, ending up living in the streets, eating out of the dumpsters. It's been raining the last couple of days and, reflecting when you're homeless on the streets and it's raining, you have to find a cardboard box and kind of place it under the right tree so that you can kind of stay dry, because if your clothes get wet, then you smelling and then you gotta, go borrow some from somebody. And it's hard when, people don't hang their clothes on the line anymore. And just reflecting on that and how challenging that was. But I also can reflect on the benefits of the 12-step programs, learning and understanding that counseling and therapy was not a bad thing, that it was a good thing, that it was something created by God to help us to work on our mental health, understanding that, the better I take care of myself, then I can even set boundaries and demand that other people take care of me and treat me a certain way. So I'm very intentional about it because I never want to go back to the streets. I never want to go back to that place of mental delusion where, I'm chasing drugs and alcohol for 21 days, literally don't even know what day it is. I can tell you whether it's day or night. And sometimes we can get ourselves into those places if we don't manage our lives in an effective way. And it doesn't have to be induced by drugs or alcohol. Just living life in constant toxic environments with toxic people, negative spirits, drama all the time. It will emotionally bankrupt you. You can't think. You lose all your creativity. You begin to be physically unhealthy. I have a tendency to internalize things in my body. So I get mentally discombobulated, emotionally discombobulated, and then I get physically sick. So I've had to learn tools and techniques to not allow myself to get into that darkness or to just bankrupt myself. And the more I practice it, the better I get. And some people, don't like it. People say horrible things like, you think you better than them or you got a certain position, you look down. No, I'm just confident about the value that I'm supposed to bring to this world. I just have a good understanding of who I am, and I understand what environments I can handle and what environments I'm not healthy enough to handle. And I govern myself accordingly.
That last part about knowing which environments you can handle and you can't, and I heard you mention earlier capacity, just knowing yourself well enough where that you don't have the capacity for that environment, and not being a part of it. You also touched on understanding that therapy and counseling is not bad. And I think in the Black community, we have come a long way. And now you see more conversations with Black mental health therapists and counselors and encouraging it. But there still is some hesitation to go to therapy or seek counseling because of whatever the fear may be, and the perception. For you, can you just share, and I could say share or give advice to someone who may be struggling with that, whether they're struggling with addiction, that perfectionism mindset, or needing to heal or experiencing trauma. Do you have any advice for someone to encourage them to seek therapy?
Yes, it's critically important. And, depending on where you are, you might need professional help. It's amazing that when, you know, I have a problem with my teeth, I go seek out a professional dentist. When I have a problem with my health, depending if it's my feet, I'm going to go to a podiatrist. If it's my eyes, I'm going to go to an optometrist. But we don't do that with our thinking. We don't do that with our mind. We should seek out the same level of professional help to address our thoughts and our thinking. The Bible even talks about bringing our thoughts and imagination into captivity. And as we live from day to day, striving to live in the truth, there are so many forces that want to deceive us. Because if I can be deceived in my mind, then I can ultimately be destroyed, and my capacity to create, to think, exist, and thrive is then diminished. So if you are a person that's living life from day to day, life is not easy. And I think we need to be honest about that. Life is difficult, it's challenging. It comes with people letting you down. We build expectations sometimes, and we have expectations of people that don't have the capacity to meet those expectations. Sometimes people have expectations of us that we don't have the capacity to meet those expectations. Sometimes, Jessica, people that are supposed to help us harm us. because they have issues. I had to at one point have a conversation with my kids. I had the first child at 21. I had my kids early, 21, 22, and 23. I was not mentally, physically, or emotionally prepared for children. I did the best I could with what I had. I was too young, I was too immature. But simultaneously, they were my biggest motivation to grow up, to try to learn, to try to do things differently, to try to protect them and provide for them for certain things. And I grew up with two wonderful, wonderful grandparents. They just grew up in a time where they were taught different things of, not saying things and addressing things, just kind of dealing with trauma in their own way and not seeking the professional help, or not perhaps taking the easy way out. To go to therapy and get the help you need is a lot easier than wrestling and going back and forth with things, just being taunted by things. And we put little things in place that will allow us to have some relief, but the trauma, something happens and it triggers the various traumas in our lives, and it comes back up again. And there's been countless research, even in schools, they do, ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. Some things, it could have been, an argument that mom and dad had that we didn't really understand that still haunts us today. Some people have experienced rape and molestation. I didn't per se have childhood trauma in that way. I got picked on a lot by kids in school because I was always tall, but I always watched wrestling. So I learned, some things to help them stop saying the stuff that they were saying. But then it got me in other trouble. I think that we have to value therapy. I think a part of us as Black people distrusting the government, being harmed so much as a race, has a residue that we just really don't even trust each other. I am so elated that we're in a time where we have people like yourself and other people of color in the psychology arena that can provide therapy and help in a culturally appropriate way for us, that we are able to process our thoughts and delineate what's the truth and what's delusional. I think this whole delusional type of living has been escalated through social media. It's all a fantasy. You and I can go on and post and create any profile we want to put up to make people think that we're what they're seeing on that profile. So I just try to live authentically. I'm also diligent about reading. I read and I listen to a lot of audible books ongoingly. And it's interesting that I always have a way of, running into something that I just need. Last year, I went through a series of audible books. One was Dying, to Be Me. A very, very powerful book about grief. I've lost now my grandmother and my granddaddy. How do I live the rest of my life without the two people that I know that authentically love me, both good, bad, and different, that got my back no matter how I mess up, they're going to always be there for me. Initially it came with a lot of fear. How am I going to make it without mama and daddy? But as I began to work through the grief, to admit that it was grief, that I was afraid, and realizing that they had spent their whole life preparing me to live without them. And I read that whole book, Dying to Be Me, that, talks a lot about grief. Another book that I read, and this one I read a couple of weeks ago, that really, really blessed me, by Mel Robinson, entitled Let Them Theory. We spend a lot of times trying to change people or make people feel a certain way about us, but Mel Robinson says, let them. They are who they are. Let them. Stop trying to control them and change them, and work on yourself, building you and being better. Another book that really helped me was this book about trauma bonding. Understanding that sometimes we can be bonded to people by trauma. When you're a public servant, you run into people in very difficult, difficult places. A couple of weeks ago, it was real cold. and it motivated me to go look for this homeless gentleman that I've met over the years and stay in contact with, who kind of chooses to be homeless as a result of some very tragic things that happened to him in Vietnam. And I was concerned. He's now battling with pancreatic cancer. He's on the street homeless. And the first night I went, I couldn't find him. I went a different time. The next day, I didn't find him. The third day, it was raining, it was cold. I couldn't find him. I ended up, getting sick with a cold myself, but I was up. I was losing sleep. Where is he? Where is he? I found his shopping cart, but I didn't find him. So I left a note and he called me the next day and I got him connected with the Broward County homeless task force. And after a couple of days, he just said, I know you have a bed. I thank you, but I just can't be in a place. My mind, I don't want to be staying nowhere. I want to just be free. So I'm gonna just, sleep in the dumpster, go behind a business so the police don't take me to jail for sleeping on public property. And I had to let him. I just read that book. I had to let him. I had to let it go where I'm not being trauma bonded because I relate to the being homelessness. I have genuine compassion for people. And now I'm making myself sick that I'm out in the rain looking for somebody. Although it's a good deed, it could be very advantageous to my mental and physical health if I don't, get a grip on it. And it's years of therapy that has taught me in interacting with people that's going to have real conversations, that's taught me how to recognize those things and do better.
Trauma bonding in that example, because so many people think trauma bonding is one thing, is powerful because we can make ourselves sick. We can harm ourselves emotionally, mentally by trauma bonding with others, especially when we want something for them so much. We want it so bad, and that's not where they are or what they want. And I think that is something that, and as I have been on my own mental health journey and self care journey, just learning to, we can't change people. And you mentioned that a couple times. People have to be willing to make that change. We can support them and encourage them, but we can't, and we don't have the capacity to try to change others. So those are all some so I took notes, books that I definitely will look into, being that I recently lost my father. And all of these things are development things, and books, topics that sound like I can benefit from for myself. Senator Osgood, so you have done all of this work. You came from addiction. You talked about, being bullied as a kid for always being tall, and being able to, stand up for yourself, but overcoming addiction. You went through a divorce. You're a mother. You have your doctorate. You're sitting on multiple councils and boards. You're pouring into the community. You're holding multiple positions and wearing so many hats. And that is a lot. But when you think about your younger self, and where you want it to be in life, has success and happiness evolved for you over time? And the reason I ask that is I feel like society has put a lot of pressure on us about what success and happiness looks like. And we think about Black women who we wear that perfectionism hat, and we overwork ourselves because we are going along with other people have created as the standard and expectation. But for you, you're authentically walking in as yourself, and you're doing so many amazing things. How has, success and happiness evolved for you over time when you think back to when you were younger?
I think once I began to really get to know myself, I began to also define my own happiness. Like, I'm not the person that wants the big house with the pool because I'm not domestic. So I don't, I'm not going to fake. That's not what I want. Happiness for me. So I work really, really hard, as you just said. So once a year, I try to take a vacation out of the country where nobody knows my name. I don't have to, have people coming up to take pictures or to engage me. I can relax my dress a little bit if I want to wear, a mini dress. I don't have to worry about it. I can also learn and see, other things that are going on in the world so that my view is not so myopic to just a little space that I navigate in from day to day. Success for me is having my quiet time. I was raised as an only child, so sometimes I just go sit out by the beach and do nothing, just look at the water, look at the yachts going down the water. So I've kind of been able to define my own success, like what really, really makes me happy. I love spending time with my kids and my grandkids, even as my kids are grown. That gives me a lot of joy. So I'm very intentional about doing that. And I think the more truthful we are with ourselves about who we are and what, we really need and what really makes us happy and give us joy. Like I also get like a major kick out of celebrating people. I like to see people have accomplishments. I celebrate myself. If I do something and I'm really proud of myself. Girl, I'm proud of you. I get in the mirror, do my little dance. I'm proud of you. So I've learned how to do those things as a way of meeting my own needs. And then again, just not like I majorly kick back against this whole societal thing, trying to define what it takes for us to be successful or how we should look or how we should act or how we should be. That's kind of this whole notion of supremacy. There is no one way. That diversity is how we really, really experience the excellence of unconditional love. So I work really hard. As a kid, I really didn't have a lot of ambitions. I just like playing basketball and, wanted to one day have me a red Corvette. That was kind of it. I didn't see beyond the neighborhood, that I lived in. I didn't have the understanding of just how big
Senator
the
Osgood, you cut
whole
out.
wide
Can you hear
world
me?
is. I heard you say something, so I stopped talking.
You just cut out for a little bit, but I heard you talking about rolling out the red carpet.
Yeah, I said I just really kick back against society trying to tell us what should make us happy, who we should be, and how we should be. As a little girl, I didn't have a lot of ambitions. I just wanted to play basketball and own a red Corvette. I didn't realize that the world was a big world. You get a lot of silly little things as a child. You remember how they used to say, God got the whole wide world in his hand? And I would say, well, the whole wide world must be really small if God could like fit it in his hand. But as I began to live life, I began to understand that life was more than just the community that I lived in, the people that I saw every day. I went to college at Florida A&M, although, I dropped out the last semester and eventually went back to Nova. As I continued to work to meet more people, I continued to build my intellectual capacity through reading and conversating and traveling. I began to get busy living instead of being busy dying. So I try to live every day like to the fullest. And sometimes it's not easy. My work is hard, working a nonprofit, caring for people that are homeless, people with HIV. It's very fulfilling. And then being, a policymaker, on the school board, it was extremely joyful because I got to spend a lot of time with young people and they bring their energy. Being in the state senate and just looking at a lot of the laws that I don't agree with because I feel that the end result is to harm certain group of people, to help particular people and harm certain groups of people, especially Black and brown people. It's real counter to what I believe about the Bible, the way I believe that we should make decisions. So then the question becomes, how do I be effective in that environment that can sometimes be toxic in the sense that it goes against my morals and principles? And I found the solution in having conversations. Sometimes people make decisions. So we all make decisions based on the limited knowledge and exposure and experiences that we've had. Thank God most people's life experiences are not my life experiences. But because I've had my life experiences, I can share with them and educate them about decisions that's gonna make life hard for people that have had my life experiences or other life experiences.
Well, Senator Osgood, I have asked you a lot of questions. You have shared so much with us today. I appreciate you just showing up as your authentic self and hopefully inspiring others because it's inspired me that I can be Jessica naturally and share all of the things that have helped me to shape who I am and along my journey. Now, I do have one more question for you. It's my favorite question of the podcast. But if you could have a conversation with your younger self, what would you tell her?
If I could have a conversation with my younger self, I would tell my younger self, just be you. All of the things that you don't know now, all the things that you don't do so well, people will help you learn those things and teach you those things. I would tell myself, value the love that your grandma and granddaddy show you every day because they could have allowed you to go over to foster care, but they loved you so much and made you the apple of their eye that they kept you and raised you and made a lot of sacrifices out of their way of showing you love. They might not say it all the time, but watch what they do, how they take care of you, how they provide for you. And as you continue to grow older, you make sure that you show that love and kindness and compassion to others. And girl, don't believe everything that people say. Don't believe everything you see on TV. Don't believe everything that the world is trying to make you conform to. You are mighty okay just the way you are and who you are. Don't hide those parts of you that people don't understand or people think you weird because of. Go ahead and do your writing. Go ahead and quote your poems. Go ahead and think different than other people think. And you don't have to wear those dresses or those hair bows just because you a girl. Be okay with your braids and your jeans and your double belts and your high top sneakers. Just be your authentic self and do life the way that you feel you need to do and continue to work on building your intellectual capacity and making sure that you're living in the truth and not being drugged into trying to be something that you're not.
Love it. Oh, I love that. Thank you so much, Senator Osgood, for being here with me today. Again, sharing your story. I hope that you inspired someone as you have inspired me. And I just appreciate all that you are doing within the community, that you're doing, um, not only, in the community, in the church, but then also for the state, in this nation and the Black community. So I appreciate you. I enjoyed this conversation. And until the next time, I will see you all on the next episode. Thank you.